Princess stood at the tall window of her crystal palace, looking out at the blue oceans of her home world. Her 4 arms shook as she held the golden tablet that contained her marriage contract. The words on the screen made her stomach twist with fear. She was going to marry a human. Not just any human, but general of the Terran Federation, the most feared warrior in the galaxy. The being that other species whispered about in dark corners, their voices full of terror. "My lady, you must eat something." Her personal servant floated into the room carrying a tray of sea fruits. Large eyes showed worry as she looked at the princess. "You have not touched food for 2 days." Turned away from the window, her long, flowing hair moved like seaweed in water as she shook her head. "How can I eat when I know what waits for me?" She gestured at the tablet with one of her hands. "This contract binds me to a monster." Set down the tray and moved closer. "The marriage will bring peace between our people and the humans. Think of all the lives that will be saved." "I know my duty," said, her voice barely above a whisper. "But knowing it and accepting it are different things." She picked up the tablet again and read the reports that came with the marriage contract. Each page made her feel more afraid. The reports spoke of terrible things. Humans who burned entire planets to ash. Humans who showed no mercy to those who surrendered. Humans who fought like wild animals, caring nothing for honor or proper warfare. General was the worst of them all, according to the files. They called him the Scourge of Station. The report said he had crushed the rebellion in just 3 weeks. 3 weeks to destroy an entire resistance movement that had fought for years against everyone else. Read about the Battle of Station over and over. The humans had surrounded the station with their dark ships. No negotiations. No chance for surrender. They had simply attacked with overwhelming force until nothing was left but wreckage and bodies. The princess walked to her desk and pulled up video files on her computer. The images showed human soldiers in their black armor, walking through the ruins of conquered worlds. Their faces were hidden behind metal masks that looked like skulls. They moved without making a sound, like death itself walking among the debris. In one video, she saw General standing on the bridge of his warship. He was tall and broad, wearing armor that made him look like a machine of war. His helmet covered his entire head, so she could not see his face. But the way he stood, the way other humans moved around him with nervous respect, told her everything she needed to know. This was a being who brought destruction wherever he went. "The wedding is in 1 week," said softly. "The transport ship will arrive tomorrow to take you to Concordia Station." Concordia Station, a neutral meeting place built in space between human and territory. It was supposed to be a symbol of cooperation between species. Soon it would become the place where gave up her freedom to a creature she had never met but already feared more than death. Her sister Lyra swam into the room through the water-filled entrance. Lyra was younger and had always been braver then. She had studied the reports about humans too, but she did not seem afraid. "Sister, I have been reading more about this general," Lyra said, settling onto a floating cushion. "Some of the stories do not match." "What do you mean?" asked. "Look at this report about the station battle." Lyra pulled out her own tablet. "It says the humans destroyed everything, but look at this other file. It talks about refugee camps that were set up after the fighting. Why would monsters who kill everyone build camps for survivors?" Frowned. Maybe they kept some alive to use as slaves. Maybe, or maybe the first report was not telling the whole truth. Lyra swam closer to her sister. "I found something else strange. Every planet that humans have conquered is now more peaceful than before. Why would that happen if humans are truly cruel?" "You are trying to make me feel better," said, "but I have seen the videos. I have read the witness reports. Other species fear humans for good reasons." Lyra sighed. "I just think there might be more to this story than we know." That night lay in her bed pool, unable to sleep. She kept thinking about what her sister had said. But every time she tried to imagine that humans might not be monsters, She remembered the videos of those black-armored soldiers walking through ruins. She got up and went to her computer. She pulled up every file she could find about General. Most of them repeated the same stories: the scourge of Station, the warrior who had never lost a battle, the human who struck fear into the hearts of his enemies. But as she read deeper, she started to notice small details that seemed odd. In one report, it mentioned that human prisoners of war were always well fed and given medical care. In another, she read that humans always tried to avoid fighting near schools and hospitals. These details confused her. Why would evil beings care about the health of their prisoners? Why would monsters worry about children in schools? She shook her head. These were probably lies created by human propaganda. Everyone in the galaxy knew that humans were dangerous. Every species had stories about human cruelty. So many different peoples could not all be wrong. Could they? The next morning, the transport ship arrived. It was a beautiful vessel made by the Trade Guild, decorated with symbols of peace from dozens of different species. Packed her few belongings and said goodbye to her family. Her mother hugged her with all four arms. "Remember, daughter, you do this for our people. Your sacrifice will save thousands of lives." Her father nodded gravely. "You carry the hopes of our entire civilization. Make us proud." As the ship left her home world behind, watched the blue oceans grow smaller through her window. In 1 week, she would meet the human she was supposed to marry. In 1 week, she would look into the eyes of a monster and pledge to spend her life with him. She closed her eyes and tried to prepare herself for the nightmare that waited for her at Concordia Station. The transport ship was beautiful inside, with rooms designed for water-breathing species like. She had her own suite with a small swimming pool and windows that showed the stars outside. But even in this comfortable place, she could not stop thinking about her fear. During the 3-day journey to Concordia Station, she spent most of her time studying every file she could find about General. The ship's computer had access to military databases from across the galaxy and read everything. The more she learned, the more afraid she became. General had fought in 15 major battles and won them all. He had served in the human military for 20 years, starting as a simple soldier and rising to command entire fleets. Other generals respected him. Enemy commanders feared him. Even his own soldiers spoke of him with a mixture of admiration and nervous worry. One report described his tactics during the Vega Colony Rebellion. The rebels had taken control of 3 planets and declared independence from human rule. Other species had tried for months to end the conflict through negotiations. The rebels refused to surrender. Then the humans sent General. He surrounded all 3 planets with his ships and cut off all communications. No ships could enter or leave the rebel systems. No messages could get through. For 2 weeks, nothing happened. The rebels waited for an attack that never came. Then sent a single message to the rebel leaders. The princess read it on her screen. "You have 48 hours to surrender. If you do not, I will take your planets by force. I will show no mercy to those who resist." The rebels laughed at the message. They had strong defenses and thousands of fighters. How could one human general defeat them all? They learned the answer when the 48 hours ended. Ships attacked all 3 planets at the same time, but these were not normal attacks. The human fleet used weapons that had never heard of before. Sonic bombs that made people too sick to fight. Gas clouds that made electronics stop working. Gravity weapons that made it impossible to aim guns properly. Within 6 hours, the rebellion was over. The rebel leaders surrendered unconditionally. No buildings were destroyed. No civilians were hurt. But the rebel army simply could not function anymore. The report called it a masterpiece of psychological warfare. The rebels had been defeated not by killing them, but by making them unable to fight. It was brilliant and terrifying at the same time. Read about other battles. The defense of Europa Station, where held off an entire alien invasion force with just 3 ships. The liberation of the Tau mining colonies, where he freed thousands of enslaved workers. The destruction of the pirate fleet at Wolf 359, where he captured the enemy admiral without losing a single human life. Every victory showed the same pattern. Would study his enemies carefully. He would find their weaknesses. Then he would strike quickly and decisively, ending conflicts before they could grow worse. But the reports from non-human sources told different stories. They spoke of as a butcher who showed no honor in battle. They said he used unfair tactics and refused to follow the normal rules of war. They called him a coward who won through trickery instead of honest fighting. Did not know which reports to believe. On the second day of the journey, she received a private message on her computer. It came from Admiral, a draconian military leader who had fought against humans in the border wars. "Princess," the message said, "I heard about your upcoming marriage. I feel I must warn you about the human you are to wed. I have fought against twice. Both times my forces were completely destroyed. He is not like other warriors. He fights without honor or mercy. He uses fear as a weapon. Be careful around him. Very careful." The message included video files from Admiral's battles against. Watched them with growing horror. She saw human ships appear out of nowhere, using stealth technology that made them invisible. She saw forces strike at exactly the right moment to cause maximum confusion among their enemies. In one video, she could hear Admiral shouting orders to his officers during a battle. The draconian ships were being destroyed one by one, but they could barely see their attackers. The humans struck and disappeared like ghosts. "Where are they?" screamed in the recording. "How are they doing this?" Then's voice came over the communication system. It was calm and cold. "Admiral, you have lost this battle. Surrender now and your remaining crews will be spared. Continue fighting and they will all die." The draconian admiral refused to surrender. Within an hour, his entire fleet was floating dead in space. Turned off the video. Her hands were shaking so much that she could barely operate the computer controls. Far away, on his flagship near the human border, General was having his own sleepless nights. He stood in his private quarters, looking at files about culture and customs. He had been studying for weeks, trying to understand the people he would soon be connected to through marriage. Was not a young man anymore. At 52 years old, his hair was turning gray, and his face showed lines from years of stress and difficult decisions. He had never married before, having devoted his entire adult life to military service. The idea of taking a wife, especially an alien wife from a species he had never met, made him almost as nervous as his bride-to-be. He read about society and found it fascinating. They were peaceful people who lived in harmony with their ocean world. They solved conflicts through careful discussion and patient negotiation. War was almost unknown in their culture. This made worry. How could someone from such a gentle species ever understand someone like him? How could she accept a man whose life had been spent in battle? His aide, Lieutenant, brought him the daily intelligence reports. "Sir, we've intercepted several communications from the delegation. Princess has been reading extensively about your military record." Nodded. "I expected that. What is she learning?" "The usual reports, sir. Most of them focus on your tactical victories and, well, they make you sound pretty frightening." "I see." Looked out his window at the stars. "What do you think of our chances for making this marriage work, Lieutenant?" Was quiet for a moment. "Sir, if I may speak freely." "Always." "I think once she meets you, she'll see that the reports don't tell the whole story. You're not the monster that other species think you are." Smiled sadly. "But I am a killer, Lieutenant. I have destroyed fleets and ended lives. How do I explain that to someone who comes from a world without war?" "You could start by telling her why you do it, sir. You could explain that every battle you fight quickly is a dozen battles that never have to happen. You could tell her about all the lives you've saved by ending conflicts before they spread. Picked up a picture from his desk. It showed children from the refugee camps on Europa Station, kids from 6 different species playing together after forces had liberated them from slavers. The children were smiling and laughing, not knowing or caring that the man who saved them was feared across the galaxy. "Maybe," said quietly, "maybe she'll understand, but first I have to figure out how to not terrify her when we meet." Back on the transport ship was writing a letter to her parents. She had written it 3 times and each version said the same thing. She wanted to call off the wedding. She knew she could not send the letter. Too much depended on this marriage, peace between humans and the trade agreements that would help both species, an alliance that could prevent future wars. But as she read more about General, she became more and more convinced that she was being sacrificed to a monster. Everything she learned told her that humans were dangerous, unpredictable, and cruel. Their greatest general would surely be the worst of them all. She deleted the letter and tried to sleep. In 2 more days, she would reach Concordia Station. In 2 more days, she would meet the human who would become her husband. In 2 more days, her life as she knew it would end. Concordia Station was the most beautiful place had ever seen. The massive space station hung in the void between stars like a jewel made of crystal and metal. It had been built by 12 different species working together, and every part of it showed their combined artistry. As her transport ship docked with the station, could see gardens visible through transparent walls. There were sections filled with water for aquatic species like herself, areas with thick atmosphere for heavy world dwellers, and chambers with low gravity for the bird-like. But all this beauty could not calm her fear. Today was her wedding day. She wore the traditional marriage robes of her people, flowing garments made from biosilk that seemed to move like living water. The fabric changed colors as she walked, shifting from deep blue to silver to pale green. Her 4 arms were decorated with ancient ceremonial bracelets that had been worn by princesses for 1,000 years. Helped her prepare in the guest quarters assigned to the delegation. "You look beautiful, my lady," the servant said, adjusting the flowing veil that covered long hair. "Your ancestors would be proud." "My ancestors never had to marry aliens," replied, though she tried to keep the bitterness out of her voice. Through the window of her room, she could see human ships docked at the station. They were dark and angular, built for war rather than beauty. She wondered which one carried General. A soft chime announced that someone was at her door. "Princess," came the voice of Ambassador, the leader of the delegation. "It is time." Took a deep breath and followed the ambassador through the station's corridors. They passed representatives from dozens of species, all dressed in their finest clothing for the ceremony. Everyone seemed excited about this historic wedding. Everyone except the bride. The ceremony was being held in the Grand Assembly Hall, a huge chamber at the heart of the station. The room was designed to accommodate many different species, with pools for water breathers, platforms for flying beings, and gravity fields adjusted for various body types. As entered the hall, she saw hundreds of guests filling the space. Diplomats, military officers, trade representatives, and journalists from across the galaxy had come to witness this moment. The marriage was being broadcast live to billions of viewers on thousands of worlds. At the center of the hall stood a raised platform where the ceremony would take place, and waiting on that platform was the human she was supposed to marry. For the first time, saw General without his armor. All her fear had been based on images of him in his military gear, looking like a machine of war. But the man standing at the altar was nothing like what she had expected. He was tall, yes, and broad-shouldered, but his face was not the face of a monster. His hair was gray at the temples, and his eyes looked tired rather than cruel. There were lines around those eyes that spoke of someone who had seen too much, but also of someone who had learned to care deeply about what he had seen. He wore a simple black uniform with no decorations except for a single medal over his heart. As walked toward the platform, she saw him watching her with an expression she could not read. Was it curiosity, nervousness, fear? When she reached the platform and stood across from him, she realized that he was as uncomfortable as she was. His hands were clasped behind his back, but she could see tension in his shoulders. He was trying very hard to appear calm. The ceremony began with words spoken by High Arbiter Hun, an ancient who served as the station's chief magistrate. He spoke in the old galactic tongue about the importance of peace and the bonds that could unite different species. But barely heard the words. She was studying the human across from her, trying to match what she saw with what she had read in the reports. This man looked like he could be someone's grandfather, not the feared scourge of station. When it came time for them to speak their vows, stepped forward slightly. In a voice that was surprisingly gentle, he said, "Princess, I know this is difficult for you. I know you have heard stories about my people and about me. I understand why you might be afraid." These were not the words written in the ceremony script. Looked up at him in surprise. "I cannot change what I have been or what I have done," continued. "But I can promise you this. I will treat you with respect. I will protect you with my life. And I will do everything in my power to prove that the stories you have heard do not tell the whole truth about who humans really are." For a moment, could not speak. In all her imagining about this day, she had never thought that her new husband would acknowledge her fear or try to comfort her. Before she could respond, alarms began blaring throughout the station. Red lights flashed, and a recorded voice announced, "Security alert. All guests remain calm and stay in your current locations." Through the transparent walls of the assembly hall, could see explosions blooming like deadly flowers in the space around the station. Ships were attacking Concordia, firing weapons at the docking bays and communication arrays. Panic spread through the crowd of wedding guests. People from different species began shouting in their own languages, pushing toward the exits. Some of the flying species took to the air, circling the room in confusion. Immediately took command, though he did so without raising his voice. "Ambassador," he said to the delegation leader, "please escort your people to the emergency shelters on Deck 7. The station's defense systems will protect you there." "What about you?" asked, surprised by her own concern. "I need to coordinate with station security," replied. Then, seeing her worry, he added more gently, "Don't be afraid. These attackers, whoever they are, will not succeed." But did not go to the emergency shelters. Instead, she followed at a distance, curious to see what he would do. She watched as he made contact with the station's security chief and quickly took charge of the defense. What she saw amazed her. The human general did not bark orders or threaten anyone. Instead, he spoke calmly with each person, asking for their opinions and listening to their concerns. When a young security officer suggested a risky plan to disable the attacking ships without destroying them, not only listened but approved the plan. "We want to capture them, not kill them," she heard him tell his staff. "Dead enemies can't answer questions about who sent them." Through the security monitors, watched the battle outside. The attacking ships were small and fast, painted with the symbols of the resistance movement. These were the same rebels that had defeated at station years ago. But instead of using overwhelming force to destroy the attackers, coordinated a careful response. Station defense ships surrounded the rebel vessels while communication officers tried to contact them and convince them to surrender. One of the attacking ships broke through the defensive line and headed straight for the station's main reactor. If it reached the reactor and exploded, it would destroy Concordia and kill everyone aboard. Watched in horror as made a split-second decision. He ordered his own ship to intercept the suicide attacker, knowing that the collision might destroy both vessels. But at the last moment, the rebel pilot changed course and surrendered. Through the communication system, heard the pilot's voice. "I cannot kill innocents. This wedding was supposed to be about peace, and we have become the ones bringing war." The attack was over within an hour. All the rebel ships had been captured and their crews were taken prisoner. No one had been killed, not even the attackers. As the all-clear signal sounded, found in the security center, he was talking with the captured rebel leader through a video link, and she was shocked by what she heard. "Commander," was saying, "I know why you're angry. Your people suffered during the war, and you blame me for their losses. But attacking innocent civilians will not bring your dead back to life. It will only create more orphans and widows." The commander, a warrior with burning eyes, spat back. "You destroyed my world, human. You have no right to speak of suffering." "You're right," replied quietly. "I have no right, but I have a responsibility, and that responsibility is to make sure that what happened at station never happens again. This marriage, this alliance, is part of that effort." Listened as offered the rebel commander something she had not expected. A chance to meet with civilian leaders to discuss their grievances. A chance for peaceful negotiations instead of more fighting. As she watched this exchange, Princess began to wonder if everything she had believed about humans might be wrong. This man had just been attacked by his former enemies, but instead of seeking revenge, he was offering them hope. For the first time since learning about her arranged marriage, she began to think that maybe, just maybe, her new husband was not the monster she had feared. After the attack on Concordia Station, the wedding ceremony was postponed for 3 days. During that time, Princess found herself thinking more and more about the human she had married. She had seen him handle the crisis with a calmness and wisdom that surprised her, but she still knew so little about who really was. On the second day, she decided to visit him in his temporary quarters aboard the station. She told herself it was simply her duty as his wife to check on his well-being, but truthfully, her curiosity had grown stronger than her fear. Answered the door himself, wearing a simple gray uniform without any military decorations. When he saw her, his tired eyes showed surprise and what might have been pleasure. "Princess," he said, stepping aside to let her enter, "please come in. I hope you're recovering well from the excitement." His quarters were plain but comfortable, designed for human needs. There were windows that showed the stars outside, a small sitting area and walls lined with books. Real paper books, not digital files. Had never seen so many physical books in one place. "You read books?" she asked, swimming closer to examine the shelves. Smiled, and for the first time, his expression seemed genuinely warm. "Old habit from childhood. My grandmother always said that books made better companions than computers because they never tried to give you more information than you asked for." The titles were in several different languages, including some that recognized from her diplomatic studies. There were books about history, philosophy, art, and poetry from dozens of different worlds. "I did not expect a military commander to read poetry," she admitted. "Why not?" asked, settling into a chair and gesturing for her to make herself comfortable on a floating cushion designed for aquatic visitors. "War and poetry have always gone together. Soldiers need beauty to remember what they're fighting to protect." This was not what I'd expected from the conversation. "In the reports I read about you, they said you were ruthless. They called you the scourge of station." His face grew serious. "Yes, I've heard that name. May I ask what else the reports told you?" "They said you destroyed the rebellion without mercy. They said you burned their ships and showed no honor in battle." Watched his face carefully as she spoke. Was quiet for a long moment. Then he stood and walked to his computer terminal. "Would you like to see what really happened at station?" He pulled up files that had never seen before. Video recordings from the human ships during the battle, communication logs, and after-action reports that told a very different story from the ones she had read. "The rebellion wasn't what most people think it was," began, showing her images on the screen. "The rebels had taken control of station, yes, But what the reports don't usually mention is that they were using the station's civilian population as human shields. The video showed the interior of station before the human attack. Could see thousands of civilians from many different species being held in the station's cargo bays. Men, women, and children who had been traveling through the system when the rebels took control. The rebel leaders said they would kill all the hostages if anyone tried to retake the station, continued. They had been holding these people for 6 months. Many were sick. Some were dying from lack of proper medical care. Watched the videos with growing understanding. So you had to find a way to defeat the rebels without harming the civilians. Exactly. Traditional military tactics would have gotten thousands of innocent people killed. So we developed new methods. Showed her technical displays that explained the unusual weapons his forces had used. Sonic disruptors that made it impossible for the rebels to coordinate their defenses. Electromagnetic pulse weapons that disabled their equipment without damaging the station's life support systems. Neural disruption fields that made them too disoriented to fight, but didn't cause permanent harm. But why did the reports say you showed no mercy? Smiled grimly. Because mercy can look like cruelty from the outside. We gave the rebels no chance to regroup or reorganize. We hit them with everything at once from every direction until they had no choice but to surrender. To their enemies, it looked like we were being unnecessarily harsh. He showed her more files, including medical reports from after the battle. Every rebel soldier captured at station had been given full medical treatment. They were fed, housed, and eventually released back to their families. Many of them later spoke about how surprised they were by the humane treatment they received from their human captors. But the most important thing, said, was what we found in the station's computers after we captured it. The files he showed next made gasp with shock. The rebels had not been fighting for independence at all. They had been working for a criminal organization that trafficked slaves across the galaxy. The civilians they held hostage were not random travelers but people who had been kidnapped and were being prepared for sale to the highest bidders. We didn't just stop a rebellion, explained. We broke up one of the largest slave trading operations in the galaxy. Those civilians we rescued. They went home to families who had thought they were dead. Looked at the human commander with new eyes. Why don't more people know this story? Because the families of the rescued people asked us not to publicize it. They didn't want their loved ones to be known throughout the galaxy as former slaves. And because, his voice grew heavy, sometimes it's easier to be feared than to be understood. What do you mean? Walked back to his bookshelf and pulled out a slim volume of poetry. There's a human saying, if you want peace, prepare for war. The galaxy is full of criminals, slave traders, and would-be conquerors who think they can prey on peaceful species. If those predators believe that humans are monsters who will crush them without mercy, they think twice before starting trouble. So you let people fear you to prevent wars from starting. It's more complicated than that, but yes. Every conflict we end quickly and decisively is a dozen conflicts that never happen at all. Every criminal organization that decides not to raid human-protected space is hundreds of innocent lives that don't get destroyed. Swam closer to him, studying his face. But that means you carry the burden of being misunderstood by everyone. Not everyone, said softly. I hope my wife might understand given time. They talked for hours after that. Showed her videos of human colonies, where former enemies now lived peacefully alongside human settlers. He explained how human military doctrine was built around the idea of protecting civilians first, ending conflicts second, and preserving honor third. Other species fight according to ancient codes of honor, he said. They have rules about fair combat and proper behavior in war. Humans learned long ago that wars are never fair, and the only proper behavior is to end them as quickly as possible. He showed her footage from the liberation of the Tau mining colonies, where human forces had freed thousands of enslaved workers from dozens of different species. The former slaves had built a monument to their human liberators, but the monument was in a remote location where few people would ever see it. "Why hide it?" asked. "Because we didn't free them for recognition," replied. "We freed them because slavery is wrong." As the evening grew late, walked her back to her own quarters. At her door, she turned to face him. "I owe you an apology," she said. "I believed the stories about you without trying to learn the truth." "You had no reason to doubt them," replied. "And truthfully, some of the stories are accurate. I have killed people. I have destroyed ships and ended lives. The difference is in the why, not the what." "Will you tell me more about the why?" Looked surprised by the question. "If you want to know, but are you sure? Some of the stories are not pleasant." "I'm sure," said, and realized she meant it. "I want to understand who I married." As she prepared for sleep that night, Princess found herself thinking about something had said during their conversation. He had quoted a line from one of his poetry books. "The best warriors are those who hate war the most because they understand its true cost." For the first time since learning about her arranged marriage, she began to think that maybe her husband was not a monster at all. Maybe he was something much more complex and much more interesting. A man who had chosen to be hated by the galaxy in order to protect it. Maybe, she thought as she drifted off to sleep, she could learn to respect that choice. And maybe, given enough time, she could learn to care about the man who made it. 3 months had passed since the wedding on Concordia Station. Princess now lived aboard's flagship, the UES Endeavor, as they traveled between human and worlds to strengthen the new alliance between their peoples. The ship had been modified to accommodate her needs, with water-filled chambers connected to the normal air-breathing areas, but more importantly, had begun to feel at home among the human crew. They treated her with respect and genuine warmth, not the fearful politeness she had expected. She had learned to read the expressions on human faces and to understand their strange sense of humor. Humans laughed at things that other species found confusing, but discovered that their jokes usually came from a desire to find light in dark situations rather than cruelty. Had become a patient teacher, explaining human customs and introducing her to his officers. She learned that Lieutenant collected music from different worlds, that Commander wrote letters to her children every day, and that Chief Engineer built tiny mechanical sculptures in his spare time. These people were nothing like the cold warriors she had imagined. They were individuals with families, hobbies, hopes, and fears. They worried about their loved ones back home and shared pictures of their children with anyone who would look. But it was during their 3rd month together that truly began to understand what and his people were really like. The crisis began with an urgent message from the Outer Rim colonies. A plague had broken out on 6 different worlds, affecting 17 different species. The disease spread quickly and caused terrible suffering. Local medical facilities were overwhelmed, and millions of people needed help. "We have to respond," told his senior staff during the emergency briefing. "These colonies are too far from the core worlds to get help quickly through normal channels." "Sir," said Commander, "our medical supplies are limited, and we're just one ship. There are at least 20 million people who need help across those 6 worlds." "Then we'll have to be creative," replied, "and we'll have to move fast." Watched from the back of the briefing room as and his officers planned their response. What she saw amazed her. Instead of approaching this as a military problem, they treated it as a puzzle that required all their different skills and knowledge. Chief Engineer suggested modifying the ship's manufacturing systems to produce medical supplies. Doctor, the ship's medical officer and cousin, proposed new treatment protocols that could work for multiple species at once. Lieutenant recommended reaching out to alien medical experts who might know more about treating the affected species. "What about the?" asked, looking at. "Your people have advanced biotechnology. Would they be willing to help?" I can contact the medical council, replied, surprised to be included in the planning. They would definitely want to help with something like this. Smiled, good. Can you set up a communication link? We'll need to coordinate our efforts. For the next 2 weeks, worked alongside and his crew as they raced to help the plague victims. She watched human efficiency in action and began to understand why other species found it both impressive and frightening. The humans worked 18-hour days without complaining. They turned their warship into a mobile hospital and supply depot. They reached out to dozens of species for help and advice, putting together a relief effort that spanned half the galaxy. But most importantly, they never gave up on anyone. Was in the medical bay when they received word that one of the infected worlds, a small colony called Haven, was beyond saving. The plague had spread too far, and the local government was considering evacuating the healthy population and abandoning the sick. Absolutely not, said when the colony's governor suggested this plan during a video call. We don't leave people behind. General, the governor replied, be realistic. We have limited resources and limited time. If we try to save everyone, we might lose everyone. Governor, with respect, you asked for human help. This is how humans help. We save everyone or we die trying. Turned to his staff. Doctor, how long would it take to synthesize enough medicine for Haven's entire population? Working around the clock, 60 hours, maybe 70. Commander, can we get there in 60 hours? If we push the engines past safe limits, yes, sir. Chief, can the engines handle it? They won't like it, but they'll do it, sir. Watched this exchange with growing admiration. These humans were willing to risk their own lives and their ship to save people they had never met, people from species they barely knew. The rescue of Haven took 3 days. The Endeavor's engines nearly failed twice, but his engineering team kept them running through sheer determination. The medical team worked without sleep, producing medicine and treating patients. Coordinated supply runs from 5 different worlds, calling in favors from allies across the galaxy. When it was over, they had saved every single person on Haven. Not one life was lost to the plague. As they left Haven behind, found on the ship's observation deck, staring out at the stars. He looked exhausted but satisfied. How do you do it? She asked. Do what? Care so much about people you've never met. Risk everything for strangers. Was quiet for a moment. My grandmother used to tell me a story when I was young. She said that every person in the galaxy is connected by invisible threads. When one person suffers, the threads carry that pain to everyone else. When one person is saved, the joy travels along the same threads. Do you believe that? I believe that if we don't help each other, no one will help us when we need it. I believe that the species who show mercy will receive mercy. And I believe that the universe is a better place when we choose to be kind instead of cruel. A week later, representatives from all the species they had helped during the plague crisis gathered on Concordia Station to thank the human relief effort. The ceremony was broadcast across the galaxy and was asked to speak on behalf of the non-human worlds. She stood at the podium, looking out at an audience that included diplomats, journalists, and military officers from hundreds of different species. She knew that billions of beings across the galaxy were watching her words. 3 months ago, she began, I was afraid to marry a human. I had read reports that described humans as monsters, as cruel warriors who showed no mercy to their enemies. I believed those reports because so many different species told the same stories. The audience was completely silent, waiting to hear what she would say next. I was wrong, continued. Not about the facts in those reports. General has indeed fought in many battles and won them all. He has destroyed enemy fleets and defeated rebellions. But I was wrong about what those facts mean. She gestured toward, who was sitting in the front row looking uncomfortable with the attention. The humans fight hard not because they love war, but because they hate it. They end conflicts quickly not because they are cruel, but because they understand that mercy shown to an enemy today can prevent the deaths of innocents tomorrow. They are willing to be feared and misunderstood because they care more about protecting others than about protecting their own reputation. The audience began to murmur as they listened to her words. During the recent plague crisis, I watched human soldiers work 18 hours a day to save people they had never met. I watched them risk their lives for strangers from species they barely knew. I watched them refuse to give up on anyone, no matter how hopeless the situation seemed. She paused, looking directly into the camera that was broadcasting her speech across the galaxy. The galaxy fears humans because they are effective warriors, but I have learned that they are effective warriors because they are compassionate people. They fight so hard to win because they understand the true cost of losing. They show no mercy to enemies who threaten innocents because they save all their mercy for the innocents themselves. The applause began slowly but grew stronger as her words sank in. Representatives from dozens of species rose to their feet, showing their approval. So I say to you today, concluded, do not fear humans because they are strong. Trust them because they use their strength to protect those who cannot protect themselves. Do not fear them because they are effective. Be grateful that when darkness comes to the galaxy, these people will stand between it and the light. After the ceremony, as she walked through the gardens of Concordia Station, reflected on how much her life had changed. Do you ever regret it, asked, giving up your old life to marry a stranger? Considered the question seriously. I gave up one life, she said finally, but I gained something better. I gained a partner who shows me new ways to see the universe. I gained friends among your crew who treat me like family, and I gained a purpose that goes beyond just myself. What purpose is that? Helping people understand each other, building bridges between species who think they have nothing in common, showing the galaxy that differences can be strengths instead of sources of fear. Smiled, that sounds like a good purpose for a life. It sounds like something worth fighting for, agreed. As they walked under the artificial stars of the station's sky, Princess thought about the future. There would be more crises to face, more misunderstandings to resolve, more bridges to build between different worlds and different peoples. But she would not face those challenges alone. She had a partner now, someone who had taught her that true strength comes not from the power to destroy, but from the wisdom to know when to use that power and when to stay your hand. She had learned that the most dangerous beings in the galaxy might also be the most compassionate. And she had discovered that sometimes the greatest gift you can give someone is not to remove their fears, but to prove that their fears are unfounded. The human she had been so afraid to marry had become her closest friend and strongest ally. Together, they would continue to work toward a galaxy where strength protected peace, where differences created understanding, and where former enemies could become family. It was thought, a future worth believing in.